Hello everyone and welcome to the Agile series. I'm Justin Ryan, I'm a Program Manager in Financial Services and I work with Agile and a range of other methodologies. And myself, Erika, Barden, who you can see on the screen now, Pranab Ghosh and TB Saivera have all had different experiences with Agile. And we thought during the lockdown, it'd be a useful exercise to share some of our experience for people that aren't as experienced with Agile and or just want to learn more about it. So the first in the series is Erika Barden. She's going to be talking about Agile as a concept, Agile in practice. She's very experienced with Agile, advises all sorts of organizations, including governments, on how to apply it and use it effectively. And today she's going to give us an overview of what that means and how it works. So Erika, over to you.
Thanks so much, Justin. Really excited to be here. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Agile gets a bit of a bad rap. There's lots of people talking about it at the moment. There's a lot of people who don't really know what it means. And that's one of the reasons this series has been set up, to explain some of those myths and misconceptions, to hear from people who are actually doing it in our daily lives, and to learn a bit from each other. So thanks very much for joining. I'm going to kick right onto my slides and actually start by talking to you about a number of really exciting things like what is Agile, and then get into how Agile is different from waterfall delivery, talk about the benefits of Agile, and then actually talk about a client that I'm working with at the moment who's undertaking a large-scale Agile transformation, and then look at some of the key learnings that I've had along that journey. So let's get into it. What is Agile? So a lot of people think Agile is about sticking post-it notes up on the wall, having meetings where you stand up, and there's lots of other things I think it might be. But what is really important, and what is actually more important than doing Agile, is being Agile. And that starts with our mindset. It starts with having an Agile mindset, being open to change, being open to doing things differently. If you don't get it right, that's fine, because that's life. But it's learning from that really, really quickly and moving on. We call it failing fast. Failing fast, learning fast, succeeding faster. And once you have that base mindset of being open to doing something different, that's when you can start layering the Agile values and principles on top of that. So there are 4 Agile values, there are 12 principles. They were written down in 2001 actually, in a document called the Agile Manifesto. So they've been around for over 20 years, and I'll get into them very shortly. But what's really key is that it's not just for technology projects. This works really well for all sorts of other things as well. So it works fabulously well in financial services, for learning and development, with talent. You can use these sorts of things at home as well. And it's once you get your mindset right, you understand the values and the principles which then drive our behaviours, it's then and only then we should start looking at the practices, the processes and tools. And there's lots of different practices. You may have heard of things like Scrum or Kanban. They're all really great. You should tailor it to what's most relevant to your environment, your people, and your culture. And it's not till then that you should really get into putting sticky notes on walls. All right, so that's just a very quick overview of why being Agile is more important than doing Agile. And if we talk now about some of the values, these are really great values to have. And like lots of things in Agile, once you understand what it means, it's it makes sense. It's not rocket science. So what we're saying here is that Agile values individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So it's all about the people. And you've probably had experience in projects or programs that you may have been in as well. Whole heap of time and money spent on the software or the technology or the process. But if you don't invest in your people, then it's never going to be successful. So Agile is all about the people, how we interact with each other, how we interact with our customers, and how we really focus on value all the time. This is an interesting one here. It's talking about Agile valuing working software over comprehensive documentation. So don't worry, we're not throwing out documents. We absolutely still need those. But what we don't want is having those giant tombs of documents that just takes ages and ages to write, ages and ages to read, or often it's sometimes not looked at ever again. What we're saying is more valuable than having lots of stuff written down is actually having something that works. Okay, and here it says working software. That's because the manifesto was written by a group of software developers. But anywhere you see software written in Agile, think product or service, because it works in the same concept there as well. Talks here again about valuing customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Don't worry, lawyers and everybody else who's interested in contracts, because we still need them. It's often done in a very different way. So that's a whole nother webinar. We won't get into that now. But what's most important is the way that we interact with our customers. And our customers could be vendors or providers who we like to think about as partners. And it's how we work with them to figure out the best solution to move forward and deliver value. And the final value is responding to change over following a plan. And again, this is where some people might get a bit concerned, especially the project and program managers amongst us. But we're saying that you still need plans. Because you know, if you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. But it's a different type of plan and a different type of planning. So the planning isn't done up front, not all of it. Not like you'd see in a traditional project where you spend a whole heap of time and investment in actually working out that magic Gantt chart that, as we know, once you start implementing, is bound to change. What we're saying in Agile is absolutely, yes, you need a plan, but you need to be responsive to change, to what's happening in your environment, what's happening with your people, with your customers, with requests that change throughout that process. And we're saying that's a good thing, because the more responsive to change you are, the more likely you are to deliver what your customer really wants.
Chris, I think that's a really good summary, Erika. And it's funny, you mentioned the first slide about mindset as the starting point. And I've been in many situations where that was not even considered, and Agile didn't work and got a bad rap and a bad reputation through no fault of its own. But everyone started trying to pull out Kanban boards and sprint charts and burn down things, and no one understood it. But if people don't, people need to appreciate that with an Agile approach, by its definition, you recognize that you don't know the answer to start with. And so therefore, there's no point spending months and months and months trying to do requirements and design and building these giant documents that we've all suffered through, only for them to be out of date by the time they're finished, because change is so constant. So that's a really interesting view.
Oh, thank you. And you're so right there. And I will talk shortly about the difference between waterfall or traditional delivery versus Agile, and how you can overcome some of those challenges that we do have in a traditional project or program environment. And what's neat to overlay on top of those values is 12 Agile principles. So I won't go through these in detail. If you're interested, please check out the Agile Manifesto online. It's there, it's free, it's very easily accessible. And it calls out what is most important when you're thinking about Agile delivery or Agile ways of working. And number one, although it's on order, is customer satisfaction. So it's things that we should be, and hopefully are, thinking about anyway, but it's literally put down on paper to really make us remember what is important and why we are delivering something. Talks about welcoming change. As we know, change is a constant, it's not going to stop. So we need to figure out a way to be resilient and actually embrace that, to work out what is best for a customer at all times. We want to deliver frequently. So we don't want to have that big bang monolithic delivery right at the end, because if you wait to do that, so often it's actually not the right solution, because so much has changed in the interim from when you started gathering requirements to when you actually deliver to your customer. We want to be working together, so that's within the organisation. So whether it be finance and technology and different business partners and your customer, you do get the best solution when you're working together and not in those functional silos. What we've found as well is that people become more motivated when they work in an Agile way, because they're seeing the value they deliver, they're working in a team environment, and we're social creatures by nature. And what we find too is that motivated teams deliver higher quality products or services, and actually more. So productivity increases as well. So it's a really positive thing for organizations as well as the people within them. Now, this is another interesting one as well. It's the value of having face-to-face communication. And as we know with COVID, that has prevented a lot of us from meeting face-to-face. What is really important about it though, is that if you're having Zoom or Team or WebEx meetings, is you make sure you have your video on. Uncomfortable as it might be to see yourself, and I'm still not used to that, it's really important to be able to see each other and to be able to look people in the eye and have a genuine conversation and actually pick up on all those non-verbal cues. So those are the things that really help us to appreciate if someone is understanding what we're saying or if they're not. So that face-to-face, whether it's physical or virtual, is the most important method of communication. We talked briefly about working software, how it's more important to actually see something working, whether it's a product or a service, rather than reading about how it should work. And it's important too to work at a constant pace. So the word sprint, which is used often in Agile, sort of connotes hard and fast and quite exhausting. That's not the idea. Okay, it's more of a constant jog. We don't want our people to burn out. Yes, we absolutely want them to be focused, but we want them to have the time to actually do a really good job and to look after their mental health and well-being, because that's super important, particularly at this time as well. Good design, that makes sense, that's important. If it's a technology project, for example, involve your architects. If you're building a house or in construction, again, talk to your architects, but just of a different sort. But think about your design at the start and keep things simple. Keep things as easy as you can. Often a really complex problem doesn't need a complex solution. So let's simplify things wherever possible. Self-organisation is something that often gets a bad rap too. A self-organising team isn't a leaderless team. A self-organising team is someone, though, a team that doesn't have a traditional manager telling them how to do things. So the team in this construct still needs vision. Okay, we need to understand where we're wanting to go, what we're wanting to achieve, what the objectives are that we have, but it's up to the team to figure out the best way to deliver to that, because they are closest to the people and closest to the work and often have the best ideas as to how to deliver. And the final one on this slide is about taking time to reflect and adjust. And this is a key tenet of Agile, when at the end of each sprint, and a sprint is just a time box, so it's a period of time, usually between 1 and 4 weeks, you actually take the time together as a team to reflect on what went well, because you want to do more of that, and what didn't, so how you can actually improve on what's gone before. And the idea there is that you're continually improving, so you're doing things better and better all the time. Now, we mentioned earlier that Agile delivery is quite different from waterfall delivery, and you can see two great examples, I think, of how you can visualize that. On the left-hand side, it's a traditional way that we have delivered projects and programs for decades. You start with your requirements, you do a design, you move into creating it, you test it at the end, and you deploy. We've done this for a very long time, and it's called waterfall because there's a sequential process flow. Each of these stages needs sign-off. And because there's a really hard phase gate there, it can take a really long time to get through the phases. Particularly, as you mentioned before, just at the beginning, you can spend weeks or months or even longer sometimes gathering requirements. And because your customer, your client has to sign those off as well, often there's lots of toing and froing before people are happy to actually put their name on a document. And then you move into the next phase. So very sequential. And as you mentioned before as well, often by the time you actually get to deliver, your customers' requirements have changed, or something in their environment has changed, or there's been lots of changes through that process, and through going through change control, you've actually added lots of time or money to your initial plan. We see so often that projects run in this way are delayed as well, or go over budget. And that's because often when you come to testing, because you're doing it at the very end of the process, it's only then, if you're doing, say, user acceptance testing, that your actual users are saying, no, that's not what I was expecting, or I was wanting something else. And it turns either that you deliver and it's a suboptimal product, you request more time and money and it goes for longer, or your customer's just not happy with the outcome. And so all really negative associations with project or program delivery. What we're saying in Agile is we want to condense all those steps and actually get quick feedback loops, so we're understanding what our customer really wants and making sure we're delivering to that. And so you see that little loop-de-loop process, it's very circular and continual. And the idea is that in each sprint, and remember that's between 1 and 4 weeks, you're doing a little bit of requirements gathering, a little bit of design, a little bit of building stuff, a little bit of testing and review. So within that period, you're interacting with your end user or your customer and really making sure that you are focused on what they want, what they really, really want. So there are no surprises at the end.
I think this is a really good diagram, and it really explains the difference between the two processes. I think some people, in terms of the customers, in waterfall they get involved early on, and then they create their great documents and they throw them over the fence, the development teams, and then they stop their involvement and they come back at the end when they're asked to test it. But they haven't had any value or line of sight to what's happened, and they're the only ones that are really aware that if the requirements have changed. And that always puts the development teams on the back foot, because no one told them. They're just working off the documents.
Exactly.
And there's no way for the business teams to kind of see what's happening after they've released the requirements. At least with Agile, one of the benefits is real value is delivered on a regular basis and it's transparent. And so
Yes.
at the end of a sprint, the business team could say, look, we've decided to reprioritize, or the requirements have changed, and everyone's aware straight away. They don't wait for 6 months to then go to UAT and find that it's wrong through no one's
Yeah,
fault. It's just the nature of
they
change.
welcome that, and that's really positive. Some people look at change as a really bad thing, but change is fantastic, because if you're getting the opportunity to change or pivot or adapt every sprint, then you're going to have a much happier customer with a much better product or service at the end. Absolutely. And that visibility, like you mentioned, is key, as well as several other benefits to working in an agile way. And one's faster time to market. So that's great, because you're actually working with your customer. It's more likely that you deliver on time, you deliver what they want, and you're getting your product or service out there quickly. And we've talked about the ability to reprioritize, like you mentioned just then. When you're playing back to your customer or involving your customer in every sprint, they can tell you if something's happening in their market or in their environment that you need to react to, and you can. You don't have to go through a really lengthy, time-consuming change management process or variation control. You can do it every sprint, which is fantastic. That performance visibility is really important as well. So as well as having the visibility from the client side, you've actually got visibility of what your team is doing. There's lots of things built into Agile to ensure this. So whether you're using Post-it notes or Kanban, if you're doing daily stand-ups to talk about what you did yesterday, what you're planning on doing today, and this way you can actually make sure that people aren't overloaded. And likewise, you can see who's not really pulling their weight, and kind of jolly them along so that they're delivering as part of the team as well. Makes sense if you're involving your customer in every step, not just at the beginning for requirements, at the end for user acceptance testing. You've got higher customer satisfaction, that's always a good thing, and team development as well. So it's not just about keeping your customer happy, it's about keeping your team happy and developing these skills. Because if they're working on a cross-functional team, even through kind of osmosis, they're learning more, and people really enjoy a little bit out of their comfort zone and having the opportunity to do different things. The financial services loves this part. It's around reduced risk. And I'm going to show you a slide, a graph on the next slide. Because if you are talking to your customers on a regular basis, again, there are no nasty surprises at the end. So you're actually reducing your risk, because you're increasing the likelihood that your customers are going to like what you're delivering. They're going to buy your product or service or pay the invoice. So there's really lots of positive financial benefits from working in this way as well. And if you're actually creating a product, say it's a gaming type product, if you can get your product to market faster, and if you can even get them an MVP, which is a minimum viable product, you can actually get that in the market as a beta version. People can pay you for that. So you're getting money back into the coffers earlier, and you can use that money for future development and more sprints. So those are some really positive benefits of working in an agile way. And here's some really quick graphs just to illustrate that. So if you look at the orangey line being agile development and the blue one being the traditional way that we've done things, and again, you're thinking about that big bang delivery at the end, you only deliver value, whether it be business value, customer value, at the end of the process, the end of the project or the program, when you're working a traditional way. But if you're delivering iteratively and throughout your agile project or program, then you're delivering that business value all the time. Then if you look to that risk graph, that's really telling, isn't it? Excuse me. So again, with agile development, you might have a bit of risk up front, but because you're interacting constantly with your end user or your customer, you're finding out if there's any challenges or changes along the way, and you can quickly adapt to that. Whereas in the waterfall world, you get your requirements, you build, you develop, you test, you release, and you really hope that you've got it right. Although, as you know, most projects don't, because you can't see into the future when you're writing those requirements at the beginning. That visibility, Justin, you mentioned, is really important, and you've got that constant visibility through that sprint process. There's playbacks or showcases as part of a Scrum type construct in Agile, whereas again, the traditional waterfall way of doing things. There's visibility up front with requirements gathering. Everything kind of goes into a black hole. The developers beaver away and do their things, and then you see it at the testing. So that's not great. And again, we keep calling out, I guess, Agile, the name itself connotes this too, around adaptability. Being agile in terms of able to quickly change and adapt to changing market and customer requirements. There are ways of doing Agile at scale as well. So you may have heard about Scrum and Kanban and some of those team-based ways or the practices of doing Agile. There's about half a dozen at least scaled Agile models as well. And this is a picture from SAFE, which stands for Scaled Agile Transformation. This is part of the transformation that I'm involved in New Zealand with a company of about 4,000 people. And it's taking those tenets of Scrum and the practices of Agile and the mindset and looking at leadership as well. And it's looking at how can we make our organizations Agile? How do we have the flexibility within our enterprise to quickly adapt to what our customers want and to what our people are saying that they need from us? So there are lots of different ways of doing it. This is just one example. This is the most popular globally and is used by lots of different companies trying to do scaled Agile. So just a wee example to show that it can scale up. It doesn't just have to be at team level. To wrap up, I thought I'd share some of my learnings. I have been in this space for a wee while now and I love it. So just to share my 5 top things with you. Number 1, you must start from the top. All successful change needs to come top down, which doesn't sound very agile, but it's true. So you really must spend the time training your exec or your lead team and actually get them to be visible and vocal sponsors of this change, because Agile, as you can see, is a really big change, not just in process, but in the mindset, in the way that we think about things. You must invest in your people, okay? Yes, you can do lots of things very cheaply, but if you really are interested in doing a full-scale Agile transformation, you've got to spend the money on training and coaching. And not just training, because it's all well and good sending someone on a training course, but you need someone to support them when they come back into the office and actually try and put these behaviours and learnings back into practice. You've got to look at your organisational culture as well. So lots of organisations aren't set up to be risk averse or to quickly pivot and change, and that's fine, but it's how much are you willing to embrace uncertainty, to collaborate across functional silos, and to understand that it's okay to fail small and fast. So looking at the culture and how we support people working in a new way is really important too, as is setting realistic expectations. Sounds a bit cheesy, but Agile is a journey, it's not a destination. Yes, you do need a vision and idea of where you want to go to, but like anything else, that's subject to change and shift as you go along that path. So just be open to that. It's going to take time. And communicate. Communicate and celebrate. Both are really important things to do. You've got to keep people informed. When they see people working a different way, acting a different way, they want to know why. So tell them. Really communicate, whether it's posters or wikis or brown bag sessions or having your chief executive stand up and say why it's so important that we're working in this way. Do that and celebrate your wins, whether it's with a cup of tea or a glass of wine or a muffin, or just sending out an email to congratulate someone. It's really important that we do that. We love being celebrated. We like knowing that we're getting some things right, which is really positive, and it keeps us all moving in the right direction.
Those are excellent key learnings, Erika. Thanks. I recognise pretty much all of those. And one thing that made me think when the first point was around training the executive team, it's funny, Agile almost in itself is a cultural change. And I think in some situations, particularly for executives and sometimes in financial services in particular, it's a fairly conservative industry, it's relationship based, and it's not particularly keen on much change. And so for the executives to go through training on Agile and then to have their support at the top of the organization, that really helps, because it makes it okay for everyone else to recognize, actually, we don't know what we're doing when we start off these things, especially if it's a multi-year program. We've got no idea what the end will look like. So if they are saying the same things and the message is consistent, that it's okay to fail and fail fast and small, then that really helps. And your other point about not just sending people on a training course and then getting them back in the office, because the predominant culture will just take over again.
Mm.
And so you really do, it is enormously valuable to have agile coaches on site, sitting in the meetings, helping the product owners, helping the scrum masters, helping the team, just advising them on how to apply the methodology, because it's new. If the organization hasn't been through it before, then it's quite hard for people who feel accountable and are used to a previous culture to adapt and change themselves. And a coach can really help.
Yes, and it's all about having that support because it is a big change. And it's great because they've been through it themselves, they've been on that journey, and it's about guiding and encouraging people to do it and to give stuff a go. So it's great. Love Agile, definitely recommend it. And for places like financial services that are built on relationships, again, this is all about the people. It's just putting a different framework around that, and it actually makes it easier for you to be successful.
Well, that's really helpful. Thanks very much for your time. In the next session, we've got Pranab Ghosh, who's going to give us some industry examples of Agile and how to apply it, or how it's been applied from within a program that was Waterfall and moved to Agile, and then how an entire organization moved from Waterfall to Agile on a wider scale. And then the final in the series is Tipu Saivera, who's a scientist in neurology, and she'll be giving us a view of why and how Agile is actually brain friendly. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions for Erika, please post them online. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.